My name is Erica Peckham. I'm the wildlife biologist for the Game and Fish in Gillette, and I'm just going to go over the hunting season proposals for 2023 in this corner of the state. I'm just going to touch very briefly on each of the herds that I manage and talk about kind of where they are as far as the objective and what we're doing with license issuance to try and address that. In general, though, the deer and antelope herds in this corner of the state are mostly below objective. This is kind of due to various factors, harsh winters, summers that have had drought, and this is resultant in poor rangeland condition. And then the rangeland condition affects the conditions of the does, which then affects fawn production and survival. And this fawn production and survival is really what is driving these herds, whether up or down. Another factor that has been at play, unfortunately, is disease. A couple years ago, we had a really bad blue tongue and EHD outbreak. It was still around a little bit last year, but it really had an impact on herds, and a lot of them are still trying to rebound from that. So we're going to start off with the proposed pronghorn seasons for the northeast corner of the state. All of these areas are limited quota areas, which allows us some flexibility in the management. And then again, just to reiterate, overall numbers are down in this area with all of these herds below objective, but some are more so than others. So Pumpkin Butte's antelope herd consists of Area 23, and this is located south and west of Gillette. The objective for this herd is 18,000, and we're estimated at around 16,000. So this one is actually one of the herds in the area that doesn't seem to be struggling as much as some of the others. And it also appears that looking at all of the data and just on the ground observations, that it's trending upward. So it's still kind of below where we would like to see it, and hunter and landowner comments kind of say similar as well. So the one thing that we can do to address this is just a reduction in the doe fawn licenses. So that is reflected here in the proposal. So a slight reduction. I hope that things continue to trend upwards and that we can hopefully kind of start reinstating some of these licenses that we've cut the last few years. But cutting a few of the doe fawn licenses could help to bring this herd closer to objective. Moving on to the North Black Hills Antelope Herd Unit, this consists of areas 1, 2, 3, 18, and 19. So the whole kind of northeast corner of the state here. This herd in general has been really fairly below objective the last several years, kind of struggling with some poor fawn production and, again, related to habitat conditions and weather. But the objective for this herd is 17,000, and we're estimating it to be around 11,000, so fairly far below objective. We've cut licenses in here the last few years in some of these areas, and this year we continue to do so in some of them. Really, the only area that seems to be kind of holding on and experiencing fairly high harvest success and good fawn ratios is Area 1. So no changes are proposed to that area. The rest of the areas, they're kind of struggling still with kind of low harvest success and not great fawn production. So that's kind of illustrated here in the proposed license issuance. Kind of an emphasis on cutting some of these doe fawn licenses more so than the type 1. So Cutting those is going to allow the population to increase a little bit this year. The Gillette antelope herd consists of Area 17 and is located northwest of Gillette. This is a herd that has been really struggling the last several years. 3 years ago, Mycoplasma, a disease, came through. It was kind of localized, but it definitely took a toll on the antelope in parts of this hunt area. The blue tongue and EHD outbreak 2 years ago as well seemed to affect them. We've had just several years of poor fawn production too. So just a lot of things kind of going against this herd, and classification numbers are down, and everything is pointing to a herd that is well below objective. So we've made license cuts the last few years here and are going to continue to do so until we can get this herd to kind of show that it is rebounding from some of these things. So a substantial cut to the type 1 licenses, and then really going down to the pretty minimum that we can have for type 6 licenses this year. Black Thunder herd unit is a very large herd that consists of numerous hunt areas. For my portion of this presentation, I'll just be addressing areas 24 and 27. So 24 is just southeast of Gillette, and 27 is just east and south of Wright. One thing kind of notable about Area 27 is it is kind of one of our public access areas, so there is a fair amount of public land in here, which is different from some of the other hunt areas in this corner of the state. But overall, this herd is estimated to be below objective and has been the last several years. So license cuts were made all the way across the board in all of these hunt areas. So for 24 and 27, it's a slight reduction in some of these. And so hopefully this will help this herd to trend back upwards. Okay, so moving on to the proposed deer seasons, and I just really want to highlight some things with this slide, and that is that all of these herds in this area of the state are really struggling. They're all fairly far below objective, and have been, and again, various factors at play for this, but yeah, you can kind of see here what we're striving to manage for, and then in the red what we're estimating it to be. So you can see that they're really well below where we'd like to see them. I realize that this is kind of a busy slide, but it seemed like the easiest way to look at things at the hunt areas in my district was just to put it out here and then kind of go through and individually address some of the major changes that are being proposed. I do have it ordered somewhat in terms of which herd unit these hunt areas fall in, so that it can be a little bit more grouped together. So I'll just kind of go over some of the big proposed changes, and then I will have a follow-up slide, particularly on the Powder River herd unit and Pumpkin Buttes herd unit. So to start off with the Black Hills herd, so this is a herd that is far below objective right now. Numbers are very low. This herd naturally cycles and has lows and highs, and so it's pretty predictable. It's just that the lows that we're seeing right now are lower than they have been in the past. So typically this season runs through the full month of November, and years when the population is at that low point, we have changed the season closure to November 20th. So we did that last year, and things were still very grim. Hunter comments were overwhelmingly critical people were questioning why the season wasn't more conservative or closed, and I've received, comments echoing that as well from some landowners. Only 2 comments out of 218 were positive regarding their deer hunting experience in the Black Hills this year, and satisfaction is down from on both mule deer and whitetail from in the 80% to the 50% range. Just our things are just not rebounding here very quickly. So again, when this herd trends back upwards, the plan is to extend these seasons back out, and just proposing this at this time to kind of give them more of a break and continue to hopefully be able to trend back upwards. I know that if you want more information, Joe Sandrini's presentation probably goes into greater detail about the Black Hills specifically. Moving on to the Powder River herd unit. So some of the biggest changes here is removal of the Type 7 licenses, so no more doe fawn mule deer harvest. They were fairly minimal in the past, but have removed those completely. Another, probably the bigger change that is being proposed is the change on the season closure date here. So 17, 18, and 19 are the only hunt areas in this corner of the state that have been running till October 20th. So the adjacent ones all close on the 14th. We basically have done everything that we can to increase numbers in here as far as using hunting as a management tool. It's a general season for residents, and it's the non-resident Region C, and so we've been reducing that regional quota for non-residents, removal of these Type 7 licenses, and really the only other mechanism that we can utilize is season length. So actually these 3 areas, 17, 18, and 19, are likely getting more pressure than some of the adjacent areas. So when these other areas close on the 14th, folks know that 17, 18, and 19 are still open, and so they're probably getting increased pressure that they don't need. So that is why we're proposing this October 14th closure, and it will put it in line with all of the other adjacent hunt areas that have an October general season. And then similar, although 19 falls within the Pumpkin Buttes herd unit, same thing here with that earlier season date proposed closure of October 14th. Again, just it's kind of hanging out there with those other 2 hunt areas as far as having a longer season. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next slide about these 3 areas. But and then the last ones are areas 10 and 21, and those fall within the Cheyenne River herd unit. Again, for 21, just getting rid of those Type 7 licenses. They were a pretty minimal amount, but we don't feel the need to have them out there right now. And then the deer area 10 is one of our limited quota areas. Success wasn't that great. Hunter comments weren't that great. Classification surveys aren't pointing towards things being great, so we have proposed to reduce that quota by 25. I did want to go into a little bit further detail regarding the proposed season length shortening in deer areas 17, 18, and 19 in particular. When we are looking at all of this data and trying to come up with seasons, there's a lot of different pieces of information we're looking at. So some of them may be our classification surveys or our counts. We do other aerial surveys that rotate around throughout the herds every year that kind of provide another measure of a population estimate. We're looking at the harvest survey, and so we're looking at all of these different things. But I think that one thing I just wanted to throw up here is the harvest survey, because the harvest success is kind of an indicator of how the kind of, are people coming into deer on the landscape, or is it getting harder? So as harvest success tapers down, that kind of indicates that deer are getting harder to come by. So when you look at each of these areas individually, overall, you can see that over the last 5 years, the harvest success has been tapering off. Area 19 is a little bit different because it does have a year where it came up there, but in general, the overall trend, even in that one, is that the harvest success has been declining the last 5 years. So because these are resident general areas, we can get rid of the Type 7 licenses, which we have done, so those are no longer available. And then we can reduce the non-resident Region C quota, which we have done the last few years. So that's another thing, even with reducing the Region C quota, at a minimum, if things were maintaining, you'd kind of anticipate the success to at least plateau. But even with those reductions, it's just further decreasing in all three of these areas. So another metric that we can look at is the days per harvest. So that's just showing that the amount of effort that it's taking to harvest a deer, basically, and that effort has also in general trended up. So particularly of concern is area 18. 36% harvest success is pretty poor, and averaging 13 days to harvest a deer. So it's just, looking at the harvest success is just one metric, but I do think that it illustrates that there's an issue here in these particular areas. Another piece of information that is really important to look at are fawn ratios. And so I've kind of pulled this up for these three areas, 17, 18, and 19. And in mule deer in general, we use 65 fawns per 100 does as kind of what we need to maintain a population. So, in general, over that, and you're going to be growing a population, and if you fall below that, it's going to likely result in a declining population on the landscape. So, we've had a few years, and in a few of the areas where it was above that 65 threshold, but in general, we are not at that level required to maintain, and we're actually at levels that would illustrate a declining population, which is what we're seeing on the ground. And when especially concerning are these when they get into like the 30s and 40s, that's pretty low, and you just aren't growing enough deer to replace those that are on the ground. So, in looking at between the fawn ratios and the harvest success, and the fact that these three areas are likely getting increased pressure for a few more days that they don't need. These are all things that are factoring into that decision to propose it to close on the 14th. And again, just being in line with everything else in the surrounding area. So moving on to the proposed elk seasons and the two herds that I manage in this corner of the state. I guess elk are kind of the anomaly. They are thriving in this part of the state and expanding further into the general areas. We have these general areas that have very long and liberal seasons so that people can stay on top of the elk and harvest them when they want to. It doesn't take long for them to become too high in numbers. In this part of the state and in this habitat type, they don't really have any natural predators, and the snow rarely gets deep enough to impede their movement. So they are a species that is definitely thriving here. For fortification elk or elk area 2, this is a second year for a general season in this area. So previous to 22, this was a limited quota area, and so this was a big change last year to go to this general area. This herd is still way above objective, so it has a trend count objective of 150 animals. So what that means is that when we survey this aerially, we are striving to count 150 on our survey, knowing that we miss a lot of those. And so we take a 3-year average of those trend counts because conditions could vary on a given year, and it may be better conditions for a flight or worse conditions. So it's on a 3-year average. We've been far above that on the last several surveys, and actually on this year's survey, we counted over 400 elk, which is more than we've counted in the past. So still far above objective. And looking at the harvest data, there were more elk harvested in 2022 under this general structure than on the limited quota, provided more opportunity for public land hunters as well. So it's proposed to stay the same this year in this general season. It seems to be doing what it's designed to do and allow us to get a little bit more harvest on these elk. For the Rochelle Hills elk herd, so this is area 113 and 123, we have a few changes proposed. So 113 is a hunt area that has a fair amount of public access, so it does provide some public land hunting opportunity. And so we are going to have a type 1 license in here this year, which was different than last year. And then we are also implementing a type 3 spike or antlerless elk. And there won't be a dedicated type 4 season. Again, that type 3 could definitely be utilized on cows as well. So it's kind of felt that numbers are doing pretty well in here. And the bull ratio is still a little bit skewed. So having this ability to get at some of those younger age class bulls could help with that. For area 123, an addition of a type 1 license, and otherwise the same seasons as last year. And I should mention that this herd has a satisfaction objective and not a numerical objective. So we are striving for 60% of the hunters and 60% of landowners to be satisfied. And hunter satisfaction in these hunt areas are typically pretty high. For 2022, it was 82% hunter satisfaction. So that's pretty good. The landowner satisfaction the last couple years has been below that 60% threshold. A big part of that is that the folks in area 113 feel that there are too many elk. So again, this season structure and proposed license issuance is designed to kind of try and meet these objectives. So that concludes everything for my big game proposals in the areas that I'm responsible for covering. And I did just want to take a minute to mention that we are proposing to close area 4 sage grouse to hunting in 2023. You can see on the map that's this kind of northeast corner here, and it's been a fairly short 3-day season with a very low limit on birds. But just looking at all of the data that we have, we feel that a season closure is justified. If you made it through to the end of this presentation, I appreciate your time, and I would urge you that if you have any questions, concerns, comments, whatever, need clarification, to please reach out to one of us listed here, and we'd be happy to visit with you.